Hi guys, my name is Miss Lilian Cañete. So we will talking about this American text linguistics. As you know, this is our virtual classroom from our platform. I'm pretty sure everybody knows about it. So let me show you here. There is a text from me. I'll show you now. Please free to text me here so we can create a WhatsApp group together, right? Right, so let's begin. As you can see, this is the first lesson. So we were talking about some concept, basic concept. But first of all, this is the definition about text linguistic part. But first of all, I would like you to watch some video speaking about what is linguistic. So let's watch it.
Linguistics is the study of language, but we're already using language right now. So let's back up a second. What do we mean by studying language? Let's go to the thought bubble. Let's pretend I'm on a trip to another country. The sun is shining, and I'm enjoying some time in a place where I don't know anyone and I don't speak the language. Then I meet another person walking along, and while we're both admiring the flowers, a rabbit hops into view. The person points at the hopping rabbit and says gavagai. So I think that must be the word in this person's language for rabbit. If I reply with rabbit, we could both learn something. But maybe that's not exactly what the other person meant. Does gavagai mean rabbit? Maybe it just means fuzzy animal, or hopping, or just, hey look, or even, as the linguistic philosopher W.V. Quine proposed, lo, an undetached rabbit part. Or maybe this particular rabbit's name is gavagai. I could ask, but I don't speak the language yet. And figuring out how to ask these complex ideas requires us to know some more basic, concrete words. Like rabbit, which is what we're trying to figure out in the first place. We need to get out of this loop. Let's start by making some tentative assumptions, but we'll stay prepared for some of them to be wrong. I'll smile, point at the hopping bunny, and say rabbit. At least I'm indicating a desire to communicate, even though neither of us can be sure exactly what the other person is trying to say. As I walk with my new friend, pointing at animals and sharing words, both of us can test and refine our initial linguistic hypotheses. Maybe we encounter some baby rabbits, and I learn that they're not called gavagai. So I can update my mental entry for gavagai to fully grown rabbit ? Maybe I'll realize something about English that I hadn't noticed before when I try to explain it, like the subtle difference between rabbit and bunny. Thanks, Thought Bubble. As we just saw, language is a unique area to study because we need to use it to study it. On the one hand, this means that we can do a lot of linguistics without needing fancy equipment, because language is right there in our brains and in the people around us. On the other hand, this also means that we need to be really precise about cultivating meta-linguistic awareness. We need to test and examine our assumptions about how language works. To do this, linguists have identified a few key features that distinguish a language from other ways of communicating. First, language exists at two levels. There's the level of the form, like sounds or handshapes, which don't have meaning in themselves. Then there's the level of combinations of forms that create meaning. So when it comes to speech, the sounds b, n, and e don't mean anything individually, but can be combined to make bunny, like our new friend gavagai. Or those same sounds can be arranged to make nubby, because it's the combination that makes the meaning, not the individual sounds. This idea that words are made up of two levels of structure is known as the duality of patterning. Also, when we look at other languages, we can see that there's no reason why a rabbit has to be called bunny. It could be called conejo, kalinchi, gavagai, or there's no inherent connection between the word bunny and this furry thing it refers to. All these other sequences of sounds and handshapes also refer to this animal. The words we use are signs that reference things in the world, like how a street sign labels which street you're on. But usually there's no specific reason why a particular word or set of smaller units of sound or shapes are used. So we can say that the choice is arbitrary. This feature of language is known as the arbitrariness of the sign and distinguishes a language from other kinds of communication. Now, it's a bit confusing because sign means two things in linguistics. First, a sign is anything that conveys a meaning beyond itself. So the word rain and the smell of moisture in the air can both be signs of rain. The word rain is an arbitrary sign since it's unconnected to the weather. A human could have said the word rain and pointed at a rock or a tree or a gavagai and the sign could have stuck. But instead, it's a sign that we arbitrarily, but collectively, decided to use for this kind of weather. But the smell of moisture is a non-arbitrary sign, since it's super connected to the experience of water droplets falling from the sky. Second, we use sign in a signed language. Here we mean a language which is produced using the hands, arms, and face, compared to a spoken language, which is produced using the tongue, lips, and throat. So the signs that make up sign languages are a subset of the first kind of signs, as are spoken words, the kind of signs that convey a meaning beyond themselves. Speaking of sign languages, it might be tempting to assume that sign languages are less arbitrary, because in words like rabbit in ASL, the hand shape looks a little bit like a rabbit's ear. But there are still many arbitrary reasons this signal means rabbit and not something else. For example, the Australian Sign Language, or Auslan sign for rabbit, looks very different. Spoken languages can have less arbitrary seeming patterns too. In Swahili, chafya means sneeze. Both chafya and sneeze have sounds that rush out of your throat like the friction of a sneeze. In contrast, mbweu means burp, and both of these words have the burp of a serious belch. Ooh, belch, that also kind of has that feeling. Still arbitrary though. Anyway, once we start building up meaning from smaller units, there are two more features that make language different from just any old communication system. One is that we can use language to talk about things that happened in the past, will happen in the future, or may happen in other worlds. Being able to talk about things that aren't right here, right now is known as displacement. Another is that we can use language to talk about language. Otherwise, it would make doing linguistics hard. These videos, impossible. The ability to get meta about language is the feature of reflexivity. When we examine other kinds of communication with these four design features in mind, we can see how they stack up against language. Bees do a complicated waggle dance to show their fellow bees where to find nectar, but they can't do it to tell a story about some great flowers they found last week or hope to find tomorrow. Their waggle dances can't manage the full range of the displacement feature. A parrot may be able to mimic the sound of many words in a language, but it doesn't understand the meaning of those sounds. Parrots don't manage duality of patterning. A dog wagging its tail always means that it's happy regardless of what culture the dog lives in. It's not an arbitrary sign. Animals can communicate, but none of the ways that animals communicate have all the design features of human language. Beyond animals, we know emojis aren't going to become their own language until we can use emojis to write a story about emojis. Emojis don't have the feature of reflexivity. Because of the unique features of human languages, the number of words and sentences we can make out of our bodies is infinite, even though the human body that we use to make them is limited. With 2 hands, 2 arms, and 10 fingers, there's only so many distinct signs we can make. And with the tongues, lips, teeth, and throat, there's only so many sounds. With this small set of shared ingredients, humans have created over 7,000 identified languages, and so many varieties within them. For example, you may know someone who speaks your language, but has a different word for something than you do, or pronounces the same word differently than you do. Like that thing that you might call a water fountain? I call it a bubbler. Linguists are interested in all the different varieties of languages that people speak and sign, not just the standardized version that gets taught in schools. That's because all language varieties tell us interesting things about how people use language. Linguists study the variations within languages as well as language itself. They approach the study of language by looking at the different levels of structure that all languages have in common. We'll tackle each one of these in more depth throughout Crash Course Linguistics, but today, let's start with the smallest chunks first and move through the larger and larger units. First, there's the study of individual sounds in spoken languages or handshapes in sign languages, which is called phonetics. Languages combine these individual sounds or handshapes into words according to specific patterns, and the study of that is called phonology. Next, they can study how longer words can often be broken down into an internal structure, an area called morphology. The study of how words group together to make sentences is syntax. And we can study and talk about the meaning of words and sentences, or semantics, and the meaning in a larger social context, or pragmatics. There are also ways we can analyze the structure of these different levels of language, or the meaning that they create. We can look at the language choices people make and how this relates to society, history, or the brain. Linguists find language to study in many different ways, like observing people, asking them questions, or doing experiments with them. Linguists can work with existing text, recordings, video, or historical documents too. And because we each know at least one language, we can sometimes even figure certain things out by consulting the language knowledge in our own heads, a process called introspection. Regardless of what level of linguistic structure or perspective we focus on, linguists, and we here at Crash Course, are interested in language as it's actually used. We're not talking about correct language, which is a pretty murky concept anyway. After all, if we were studying birdsong, we wouldn't go around telling sparrows that they're not singing right because they don't sound like parrots. Instead, we'd want to analyze all birds or all language varieties, regardless of where they stand in the pecking order. Linguistics is relevant to anyone who uses language, but it's especially relevant to certain people and industries. It's directly relevant to speech pathologists and people building speech recognition tools like the voice assistant on your phone. A knowledge of linguistics can also help people who teach grammar or languages. It's also useful for lawyers, writers, editors, poets, journalists, and people who work in jobs that require thoughtful understanding of language as a tool. And finally, understanding linguistics and how language works is valuable for anyone who wants to better understand humans and the world we live in. I studied linguistics as part of my major in college, along with writing in Spanish. Linguistics has made me more aware of how important language is, so I'm a big fan, and I'm excited to learn more with you. For the next 15 videos here in Crash Course Linguistics, we'll be exploring language at all of these different levels together, and building our understanding of language and each other. So when you and a stranger watch a rabbit hop across a field together, your two languages might not have a direct translation for what you want to say about that experience, but we can learn to understand
Quite interesting, isn't it? Well, so now, according to the video, we know what linguistics is. So it's turn to know about text linguistics. Right. So text linguistics is a branch of linguistics that deals with text, pretty obvious, as communication systems. Let's say its original aims lie over covering and describing text grammars. So it's about grammars, basically. The application of text linguistics has, however, evolved from this approach to a point at which text is viewed in much broader terms that go beyond a mere extension of traditional grammar toward entire text. So let's say grammar is the base, but there are a lot and a lot and a lot of scaffolding there. So, what's the reason for text linguistics? This is a very good question. As we know, through days we use text to communicate each other, even chatting, text online, thank you to the technology. So one of the reasons for text linguistics is because the text is extremely significant in communication. So we have some definition about what text is according to different authors. For example, we have according Werlich and according Bigron and Dessler, according to Halliday and Hazen. There are a lot of authors speaking about what text is. This is the definition according Fuller. So we have one, two, three, four definition. Oh, we have more. We have Henning Mason. But as a conclusion, we can say text linguists. What text linguists said is generally agree that text is the natural domain of language. Well, let's watch some elements. For example, we have context. What a context is. There is a text and there is other text that accompanies. What is the other text? The text that it's with, namely context. Can you see the word names? So basically the context would be the meaning what the text what is let's say close or text. And we can find three features of context of situation. For example, the field of discourse would be the experiential meaning. This is the meaning that the social action and engagement of participants are given to understanding of the text. Then we have the tenor of discourse. This is the interpersonal meaning. So this is the meaning that the roles of a relationship among participants give to the understanding of the text. So this relationship may be permanent or temporary. The contribution to meaning by social statuses of the participant also fall within this feature. So this is more more usual. Then we have the mode discourse, that is the logical meaning. This is the meaning that the language written or spoken gives to the understanding of the text. So this is will be like the literal, let's say. This includes the symbolic organization of the text as well as its intended function within the context. Then we'll see some examples. So let's talk about the texture. Texture is a basis for unity and semantic interdependence with text. We already seen the video about linguistics, and in the video they talk about semantics. So this could be, of course, a real element that is within our text. Then we can find some text types. Actually, we have, let's say, around five text types, sometimes seven, but the more usual is five. We have narrative, descriptive, argumentative, instructive, and comparison or contrast. That sometimes is called expositive. As I said before, some classification divided types of text according to their functions. Others differ because they take into consideration the topic of the text, the producer, and the addressee or the style. So now it's time to talk about the structure. We can find different types of text. For example, the shared features and the extend feature. They obviously can lead us to, two important elements. They are cohesion and coherence. To understand better these two elements, let's watch the next video.
In today's video, I will explain cohesion and coherence. Let's start with cohesion. One, cohesion is a structure and content of a sentence or text that is linked together to create meaning. Two, it combines different words to form sentences. Three, it is related to grammar. Four, it is usually in sentences. 5. For example, Ali likes yellow apples. He eats them daily. In this, he is representing Ali and them is representing yellow apples. This is cohesion. 6. Cohesion is also called grammar in sentences. Let's move towards coherence. 1. Coherency describes the way anything, such as an argument, statement, etc., hangs together. 2. It combines sentences to form discourse, and then paragraph. 3. It is related to grammar. 4. It is in discourse. 5. For example, Zane, may I have some more eyes? Yes, of course. Anytime you want more, just go ahead. 6. Coherence is also called grammar in discourse.
Right, so it was very interesting speaking about cohesion and coherence. The next one are intentionality. Then we have acceptability, informativity, and the last one, the last one, previous the last one, situationality and intertextuality. Let's talk about the intentionality. Well, this concerns to the text producer's attitude. I mean, as they said, the intention, of course. So the keyword is intention. As the producer uses cohesion and coherence to attain a goal specific in a plan. So, no cohesion and no coherence, intended goals may not be achieved due to a breakdown of communication, but depending on the condition and situation in which the text is used. The goal may still be attained even when cohesion and coherence are not fulfilled. For example, let's have here this sentence: When I carry you on my back. This is our example. Even though cohesion is not maintained in this example, the text producers still succeed in achieving the goal of finding out if the text receiver wanted a piggyback. So, intentionality basically is the intention of the text producer. So now we have stability. This is talk about the text receiver attitude that a text should constitute useful or relevant details or information worth accepting. Subtext type, the desirability of goals, and the political and social setting, as well as cohesion and coherence, are important influences in acceptability of text. The producers often speculate on the receiver's attitude, observability, and present texts that maximize the probability that the receivers will respond as desired by the producer. This is usually used for people who works in marketing, even for politicians. Let's have some examples. Texts that are open to a wide range of interpretation, such as call us before you dig, you may not be able to afterwards. Require more inference about the related consequences. This is more effective than an explicit version of the message that informs receivers the full consequences of digging without killing, because receivers are left with great uncertainty as to the consequences that could result. This plays to people's risk aversion. So, as I said before, acceptability could be when a text is accepted for a receiver. The receiver has to think if the text is worthy or not for the main receiver. The next one we have informativity. Informativity concerns the extent to which the contents of the text are already known or expected are compared to unknown and unexpected. No matter how expected or predictable content may be, a text will always be informative, at least to a certain degree, due to unforeseen variability. The processing of highly informative text demands greater cognitive ability, but at the same time is more interesting. The level of informativity should not exceed a point such that the text become too complicated and communications dangerous. Conversely, the level of informativity should also not be so low that it results in burn or rejection of the text. So informativity is the element that a text has that make the text interesting. And of course, it has not to be bored. We have two more. Situationality. This is about the factor which make a text relevant to a situation of occurrence. The situation in which a text is exchanged influences the comprehension of the text. There may be different interpretation with a road sign. For example, we have slow cars, hell up. However, the most likely interpretation of the text is obvious because the situation in which the text is presented provides the context which influences how text receivers interpret the text. The group of receivers, in this case motorists, who are required to provide a particular action will find it more reasonable to assume that slow, while that slow requires them to slow down rather than referring to the speed of the car that are ahead. Pedestrians can tell easily that a text is not directed toward them because varying their speeds is consequential and relevant to the situation. So in this way, the situation decides the senses and the use of the text. So basically, situationality is the element that can give us a context, and this context could be relevant or irrelevant. In this case, of course, it is relevant because we are talking about motorists. So the situationality of this is very important for this context. However, situationality can affect the means of cohesion. Can you see? This one, for example, doesn't have cohesion. In this case, less cohesive text may be more appropriate than more cohesive text depending on the situation. If the road sign was motorists should reduce Their speed proceeds slowly because the vehicle ahead are held up or roadworks. Therefore, proceeding at too high speed may result in an accident. Every possible doubt of intended receiver and intention would be removed. So this is important in this case for situationality. I think this is very, very understood now. So let's go to intertextually. Intertextually concern the factor which make the utilization of one text dependent upon knowledge of one or more previously in current text. If a text receiver does not have prior knowledge of a relevant text, communication may break down because the understanding of the current text is obscure. In other words, this have intertextually means a previous background of the situation. Could be kind of relationship with situationality. Let's continue. Text such as parodies, rebel dance, foreign, and class in the school. The text producer has to refer to prior texts, while the text receivers have to have knowledge of the prior text for communication to be efficient or even occur. In other text types, such as pounds, for example, time flies like an arrow, fruit flies, fruit flies like a banana, there's no need to refer to any other text because it's simple what they are talking about. They have a simple meaning. I have another video, but this time this video is in Spanish. But nevertheless, I consider it's very important to watch.
Bueno, voy a hablar acerca de lo que es la lingüística textual y la lingüística textual basada en tres documentos de los recomendados en la bibliografía. Uno es la ruta lingüística del texto, creo que es como el principal porque presenta como una especie de teorización de lo que es la lingüística textual a partir de una secuencia histórica y también contemporánea de lo que tiene que ver con el tema. Hay otro que se llama la coherencia y la cohesión, también dan como cierta visión de lo que es la lingüística textual y dos de los elementos principalmente, como lo es la coherencia y la cohesión dentro de la lingüística textual. Y por último tenemos uno que se llama la lingüística textual en los trabajos de investigación producidos por el alumnado universitario, enseñanza en las planificaciones de aula y los libros de texto, que son una serie de investigaciones que fueron analizadas de acuerdo a lo que es el tema que nos convoca. Entonces, ¿qué es la lingüística textual? Podemos entenderla como una subdisciplina de la lingüística enfocada en análisis heterogéneo con el texto como objeto de estudio. Entonces ya sabemos que tenemos el texto como objeto de estudio y el texto puede ser escrito o puede ser oral, dependiendo pues como de las concepciones que quienes lo analicen o quienes teorizan tienen de él. Y también como heterogéneo porque, como dice a continuación, aparecen diversos enfoques debido a su complejidad y perspectivas de quienes los trabajan, porque cada uno tiene como un punto de vista para trabajarlo y hay pues diferentes enfoques de acuerdo a cada uno de los niveles de la lengua para analizarlo. La lingüística textual tiene unos objetivos que son definir y delimitar lo que es un texto, como dar una concepción de lo que es y como vamos a ver, pues como de acuerdo podemos decir como periodos históricos, tiempos históricos o enfoques también, dan como concepciones diferentes de lo que es un texto, lo definen de una manera diferente. Estudia y analiza las estructuras, puede ser intratextuales o también pragmáticas o contextuales. Distingue y clasifica los tipos de texto, porque ya pues al hablar de texto hablamos de tipologías textuales y explica la función sociocultural de esto, que tiene que ver más como cuál es la función de un texto dentro de un contexto específico. Entonces, todo esto para llevarnos a que hablar un poco de la producción y la comprensión, entonces de quién escribe y de quién lee, de quién recibe e interpreta, como un emisor y un receptor. También hablamos de la microestructura, que tiene que ver como con lo gramático, si se puede decir, como la parte interna, intratextual, y la macroestructura, que ya tiene que ver más con la coherencia o con esas, como con esos juegos pragmáticos que se dan de acuerdo al texto y al contexto. Entonces vamos a hacer, pues como ya lo mencioné, como un recorrido histórico de lo que es el texto y de cómo fue analizado. Y para comenzar esto tenemos como dos conceptos, el concepto de texto y de discurso. Entonces, el texto es la unidad de análisis de la lingüística textual. ¿Qué se puede analizar dentro del texto? La adecuación, la coherencia, cohesión, gramática, lo pragmático y todo esto, pues que son propiedades del texto en sí y de la lingüística textual. Em, Está dentro de un texto, de una situación, como para hacer juego con el texto, la intención y el contexto en el que se está desenvolviendo esto. Tiene un significado específico, de acuerdo pues al contexto y también a la intención de quien es el emisor de este texto. eh, Persigue un fin específico dotado de coherencia y un receptor que otorga significado. Entonces, ¿quién es el emisor? ¿Quién escribe el texto? ¿Quién dice el discurso? Que ya voy a explicar por qué esa aclaración. Tiene una intención, tiene un fin y hay un receptor que interpreta eso que está dentro de ellos. Muchos llaman texto y discurso como de manera indiscriminada, pero básicamente es como que el texto es como la parte estática del producto y el discurso es como la parte oral, como escrito y oral, y es como la producción de esto. Mm, entonces la lingüística textual empezó más o menos en los años 60, en la década de los 60, y se concebía el texto como algo netamente gramatical. Entonces estudiaba la relación especialmente intratextual, relación entre oraciones y esos elementos que digamos que conecta una cosa con la otra. Para decir que esto básicamente lo que trabajaba era la cohesión, o sea, algo dentro del texto. Pero esto pues se queda corto para definir lo que es un texto porque hay como otros factores externos a esto. El enfoque cognitivo-comunicativo concebía el texto como una actividad comunicativa destinada a cumplir objetivos comunicativos y funciones sociales. Entonces diremos que aquí ya no solamente se habla de la estructura del texto internamente, sino que se habla más desde cuál es la intención que se tiene y cuál es la función que ese texto cumple dentro de una sociedad. Para eso hablamos de comprensión y producción y tenemos como lo enciclopédico, el conocimiento del contexto, el conocimiento lingüístico como lo gramatical, la puntuación, todo esto, conocimiento de interacción situacional, entonces conocer qué pasa en las situaciones reales para poder expresarse para un público específico y el conocimiento de las tipologías textuales que tiene que ver ya con cómo se concibe pues el texto, de acuerdo a si es una argumentación, una descripción, una explicación, cosas así, una crítica o como lo veremos pues como en la parte más contemporánea, algo digital y todo esto. Hay niveles de comprensión que tiene que ver con la funcionalidad, cuál es la función del texto con su contenido, la situación, la estructura pues que tiene que ver más como lo interno y la adecuación que ya la vamos a ver pues en unos momentos. En lo contemporáneo, el texto tiene diferente centralidad de prominencia de acuerdo a dimensiones y cualidades, que básicamente es, el texto no solamente se basa en lo gramatical, sino que hay otros niveles de la lengua como lo semántico, pragmático, lo social y todo lo que digamos que está como alrededor del texto, de la lingüística, perdón, para ser analizado. Entonces aquí ya se tienen en cuenta pues como la diversidad que tiene un texto y cómo varios niveles de la lengua convergen en un solo texto para ser analizado desde diferentes puntos de vista, acordes a quien lo escribe. En este caso se analizan rasgos formales, o sea, la forma del texto, las características o las tipologías textuales, el procesamiento cognitivo que tiene que ver con la comprensión, como ya lo vimos anteriormente, comprensión y producción, y las intencionalidades comunicativas, o sea, qué se quiere llegar con esto, cuál es la intención, qué se va a lograr con ese texto. Hay unas propiedades ya en la lingüística, entrando pues de lleno a saber lo que es la lingüística textual, cómo se analiza, y es lo que nosotros conocemos como coherencia, cohesión y adecuación. ¿Para qué es esto? Para que las ideas estén vinculadas entre sí, de acuerdo a un contexto, de acuerdo a lo que dice el texto, y usando un lenguaje apropiado al emisor, a la situación, a lo enciclopédico, o bueno, conocimiento de contexto, para que esa lectura sea sin dificultad, o sea, para algo que tiene que ver más con la comprensión. La coherencia, básicamente podemos decir que es la macroestructura, el contenido, como el tema del que se está hablando, y esto habla más como de la relación entre palabras con el texto y de palabras con el contexto. Entonces hablamos de la relación título-contenido, la relación de la estructura, introducción, cuerpo, conclusión, hay una secuencia de ideas y todo. Básicamente es como todo eso que hace que el texto sea como una unidad y las relaciones que tienen todas esas cosas para poder que el texto tenga sentido, las proposiciones, los párrafos, las oraciones, las palabras, todo esto. La cohesión es intratextual ya y podemos decir que es básicamente como algo de la forma, algo muy formal, porque nos habla, por ejemplo, de cómo en conjuntos tiene esa dependencia y para eso tenemos como diferentes maneras de unirlo, porque es explícito. Entonces tenemos, por ejemplo, lo que tiene que ver con cosas léxicas, con mecanismos de cohesión léxicos, que básicamente son las nimias, hiponimia, sinonimia, hiperonimia, las metáforas, todo esto, lo gramatical que tiene que ver con los pronombres, interrogativos, demostrativos de estos, nexos, conjunciones y preposiciones, tiempos, que se maneja un tiempo pasado, presente o futuro, la perspectiva de producción, o sea, de quién escribe, si es opinión, si es un punto de vista, todo esto, y los signos de puntuación adecuados. Y por último, la adecuación, que tiene que ver más con lo pragmático, y es que ese discurso esté adecuado a la situación comunicativa, al contexto, y que, por ejemplo, el tipo de lenguaje que se use tenga que ver con el contexto, con el grupo focal y una función.
Well, we are going to the end of this lesson. We have our summary. Here we have two views of text according to Dolnik and Baksikova. We have the text as a product and as a process. As a product, we have the text cohesion, the coherence. We talk about a lot of these two: topical organization, locutionary structure, and communicative function. As a process, the text, we have the text production, the reception, the interpretation. Then we have the definition: what is a text? It's a communicative occurrence which has to be complemented by its seven standard of textual intent of carrying out purposes. Also, it could be a letter, a recipe, a sound, a manual card, among others. It is important to say that to be a text, it must contain seven standards of textuality. The text can be reduced to four functional types. Persuasive, which is the text is constructed to make you do something. The text could use repeated words, text in capital letters, exclamation marks. Then we have informative. This one wants to advise or tell you about something. This may uses about repetition, content fact, information in a clear way. So then we have the instructive. The instructive text is a text that instructs or tells you how to do something. It may use verbs, especially imperatives. They are placed at the beginning of the sentence. They use they used to use models like must and must not, and they use numbered or bullet points. Then we have the descriptive. Descriptive text is a text that wants you to picture what is being described. It sometimes make use of an adjective or adverbs and usually use comparison to have picture to scene. The quantity and relative principle, according to Bougrand and Gisler, they have seven standard textuality, cohesion, coherence, intentionality, acceptability, informativity, We will talk about them: situationality, intertextuality, the regulative principles, efficiency and effectiveness. Efficiency required text should be used with a minimum effort. Effectiveness presumes leaving a strong impression and the creation of a favorable condition for attaining a community goal. This purpose is the use of creative, original, imaginative language which, however effective, may lead to communicative breakdown. Don't forget about appropriateness. This attempt to balance off the two above principles by seeking an accord between the text setting and the standards of textuality. We'll talk about a lot of coherence and cohesion. Actually, they are the most important element we can find in this kind of text. In the next lesson, we can talk about the two of the two of this in a more direction. But to finish this part, we can say HESIP had some devices or some tools that could be named as reference, ellipsis, substitution, lexical cohesion, conjunction. Nevertheless, coherence has repetition, synonymy, antonymy, parallelism, and transitions. Then we have the discourse. When a text is actively employed in a context of use, it becomes a discourse or a speech. The text typologies, functional classification, the situational classification, strategic classification. Functional classifications identifies cautionary text types according to the type of dominating illocutory act. That could be a representative or assertive type, expressive type, like apologies, thank you notes, greetings, everything that express feelings, declarative or performative types, that could be appointments, accusation, testaments, certificates. The second classification sort out text according to the sphere activity. For example, private, official, public, or, or form of communication. Dialogical, monological, spoken and written text. The last one, sorry, previous to the last one, we have a strategic. It is primarily with a topic and the ways of expansion, such as narrative, scripting, argumentative. And the last one, we have the genre. These speech bands of the same time are identified as belonging to a particular genre. They could be sample, which include conversations, speeches, poems, report, letter, essays, and complex, which includes religious service, sermon, soul, etc. Before finish this lesson, I would like to talk about our activity. So let's go back here. We have a forum lesson one. So you can see three questions. I would like you to please answer this. Number one, how does text linguistics differ from traditional grammar studies? Don't forget to read and watch again this video. Number two, what is important to consider the author and author's role in text linguistics? And number three, how can understanding of text linguistics enhance communication in different disciplines? I suggest you can watch again and again this video or read the two resources, texting resources we have here. So see you next lesson.